Ashton Finch woke up with a bad feeling. No, there were still a few days before the flight and he was enjoying his time on Earth, but something went wrong this morning. Actually, something went wrong last night when Jenny started talking about the death capsule, and she literally called it that. The death capsule. It's not acceptable for crew members of deep-sensing ships to say that, even though everyone understood everything. Well, why? Why did you start talking about the upcoming flight? And she also turned him on from that point of view. And how will their relationship develop after you return? What do you mean? And what will change? She hesitated, choosing her words as they strolled through the park. Well, it's not really going to be you, she finally said. What? Finch asked. What do you mean, not me? And who else, if not me? Well, you will be cloned there later, as it were. Jenny. It's just the kind of technology that allows us humans to fly from star to star. Organics can't stand it, that's true. But the capsule then restores the body, and it's completely, you hear, completely identical to the old one. The Holy Father said that if a person dies, then his soul flies to another world. What? Since when did you start listening to priests? You've never been to church. As a result, they quarreled, and no intimacy, which he was counting on, did not happen last night. But he had planned for them to spend the rest of their days in bed before the flight. He came home angry and upset, and it looked like it was his last date with Jenny. And really, why the hell is she listening to some holy man? She said they needed money for their future lives, and the Navy pays very, very well. So he decided to earn money for a wedding and a house with a swimming pool. It seems that it's not for nothing that they say that upon returning from space, those who have passed through a jump capsule muddy their relationships with their own kind. Even those who fly through the system in normal hibernation, or at the limit of the capabilities of the human body, do not create families with suicide bombers. Maybe we should give up before it's too late? There was such an opportunity, but it will completely ruin your resume, and where will you go then? Who will hire you if you don't fulfill an already signed contract? And all the arguments in favor of the fact that you suddenly did not want to climb into the death capsule. Ugh, what is this? Will be in favor of the poor. Getting out of bed, he went to the bathroom, where he was first doused with cold water and then almost scalded with boiling water. This has never happened before. Almost slipping on the wet floor, he carefully left the bathroom and began to dress, missing his pant legs several times in a row and tearing his sock. He had to look for a new pair of socks, which were not in place, although he remembered for sure that he had bought spare ones. As a result, I had to wear the same color, but different patterns. Okay, no one will see anything in sneakers or under jeans. As he got dressed, Finch kept running the same thoughts around in circles. It was getting kind of bullshit, he thought, and this despite the fact that it was ships jumping into deep space that provided Earthlings with all sorts of useful resources, without which life could not imagine now. Why the hell am I suddenly going to be different? What does other mean? You fool! Finch remembered his Jenny. And she's not yours anymore. Let him still look for someone like him. Ashton, trying to ward off a bad mood, you can't go on a flight like that, went to the nearest bar in order to drink himself into unconsciousness, so much so that I don't want to throw up. Holy shit! Damn you, he swore, when he opened the door of his apartment. He involuntarily walked under the stepladder, on which a worker in overalls was tinkering with the fire alarm. I couldn't find another place to put it. The worker glanced at Finch and said nothing, deciding that it would be better not to mess with a man in a bad mood. Silently, he went down and rearranged the high stepladder, but Finch, who had passed under it, somehow didn't care. Waving his hand viciously, he went to the elevator and pressed the call button. The elevator wasn't moving. It's broken, the worker said anyway, and receiving Finch's sharp look in response, he added uncertainly, the foreman has already been called. Finch restrained himself from kicking the elevator doors. He still didn't have enough money from the landlord, and went towards the stairs. He had to go down from the 10th floor. Just as everything went wrong yesterday, so it went on today, Finch thought as he walked down the stairs. Somewhere between the 5th and 6th floors he stumbled and almost fell down, breaking bones, but grabbed the railing in time. It turned out that his shoelace had come undone, which he had so successfully stepped on. Every 10,000th awakening, as the procedure for restoring the body in the capsule was called, statistically ends unsuccessfully, namely, with a fatal outcome for the astronaut. It popped up, as luck would have it, in my head. It's not good. It's all a second thought. Maybe I should break the contract and go as a regular handyman. Yes, there will be enough money back to back. You will live from paycheck to paycheck, constantly save, and not get out of loans. Fuck it. I decided to fly. And a big bolt on this Jenny. You'll find someone else and more beautiful, and she won't need to know that you've been to the stars. Looking around, Finch left the entrance and headed towards the bar, deciding to take a shortcut down an alley. A pitch-black cat sat on the side of the road and looked slyly at Finch. Although, of course, he looked as usual, as all cats look at people. But now everything seemed different to Finch. It seemed that the cat even stopped breathing, staring at the future guest of the death capsule. Damn you! Finch caught himself thinking that he was calling the jump capsule something it shouldn't be called. He even tilted his head slightly. Finch took a cautious step forward. The cat bent down to the ground, as if preparing to jump. And? What are you going to do? One more cautious step. The cat bent down even more, taking the on-start position. Don't even think about it. Finch clenched his fists. There were only a couple of meters left before the cat and the invisible line that Finch was going to cross before the black cat ran across his path. But the furry creature, frightened by a dog that appeared out of nowhere, darted to the side, along the opposite wall, and running across the road behind Finch, slipped into some kind of hole in the wall. In fact, Finch was cut off from all sides. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. You'll have to go. Remembering his grandmother's method, Finch folded the muzzle and put it in his pocket, crossing the line along which the black cat had cut his path. Somehow, swearing and cursing everything in the world, Finch still got to the bar, and as soon as he entered, bumped into the waiter, who was carrying 4 empty glasses in both hands. I don't care. He strode across the room, choosing a table in the corner where there were fewer people nearby. Should I say that the table turned out to be cursed? At first, the waitress didn't come up to him for a long time, which made Finch seriously angry. Then, when she finally managed to take the order, she forgot to take a pen to write it down. And when she did bring the order, which for some reason had to wait a long time, she knocked over 1 mug of beer, pouring everything around. Finch rubbed his face with the palm of his hand, trying to contain his growing anger, and literally asked to repeat his order, and even tried to calm the waitress, saying that he would have no complaints if they just brought him his beer. The dumb waitress with round eyes ran off to fulfill the order, which she returned with surprisingly quickly, and even brought an additional portion of pistachios, so to speak, as compensation from the establishment. After finishing the first 2 glasses, Finch ordered a couple more, but dark. And then another, and another. And it seems, he took a full bottle of whiskey, but he didn't remember it exactly, because everything was already a blur. When he finally decided that he had had enough and began to get up from the couch, he realized that all this time he had been sitting on a piece of gum left by a previous customer of the bar. That's the infection, he said, staggering at the table while paying the bill. He smiled angrily at the waitress and went to his house. Although why go home? No! Now he's going to that bitch Jenny and have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Not by phone, but in person. He would personally look into her eyes. And then he'll go. With her? It's possible that with her. To that damned saint who told her all about the damn death capsule. And he hadn't just brainwashed her. He probably treats all his parishioners who are in the habit of visiting him. What a brute. With that thought, he suddenly realized that he was in a completely different part of the city. And how did he get here? And most importantly, how has he not been robbed yet? I should have called a taxi. The taxi didn't go for a long time, and Finch already began to really want to go in a small way. And this somehow did not set up a constructive dialogue with his ex-fiancée, and even more so with the priest. The taxi that arrived eventually broke down halfway. It's broken, bitch. It's broken. Finch laughed out loud, which scared the Indian taxi driver, who immediately began to ask him to leave the car. Having somehow scraped together cash for part of the route, yes, he forgot the card and he forgot the phone, Finch paid the driver and went wherever his eyes looked. Passing by the park, he still managed to relieve his bladder at some large tree with a memorial plaque, but almost ran into a police patrol. But he didn't have enough articles in his personal file for violating public order. Trying to look as sober as possible, which on the contrary aroused the interest of the cops, he walked past the patrol car. Surprisingly, the cops didn't touch him, only making a couple of jokes in his direction, which, fortunately, he didn't hear. However, the cops were still interested in something about him, and they turned on the flashing light, suddenly demanding that Finch stop. But he, having darted into the inter-house space, surprisingly quickly managed to leave them behind, and the police wouldn't chase a drunken passerby without good reason. Finch barely remembered the events of the last few days leading up to the launch of the shuttle that was supposed to take him and other crew members to the jump ship. What he remembered for sure was that the day before the flight, he pulled himself together and devoted it to getting out of the binge, which, of course, he succeeded, but which did not rid him of a terrible premonition that he could not suppress. Fuck it, he thought with a kind of angry doom, as the lid of the jump capsule closed, and drugs that helped calm and relax began to flow through his veins. Peace of mind. Ha ha ha. May your soul rest, Ashton Finch. He laughed softly before passing out dead asleep. When Finch opened his eyes, he didn't immediately understand what had happened, or what he had been doing in recent weeks. At first, he decided that he had woken up in his apartment, and bright sunlight was hitting his eyes through the window, from which he squeezed his eyes shut. But after a couple of seconds, he remembered everything that had happened, and the light that blinded him came from the inner lid of the jump capsule. These were the sensors that carried out the diagnosis of his condition. He's breathing. Yes, he's breathing. He sees. Finch pinched himself, feels it. But we need to make sure. We urgently need to make sure that everything else is in order too. Jumping out of the capsule, he ran to the shower room, where he began to look at himself in the mirror from all angles. Everything is in place. There is nothing superfluous. Aha! Aha! He was lucky. All the signs aside, nonsense and obscurantism are your signs. Well, Finch, you didn't become Unlucky Joe, as those who were unlucky enough to go through the standard recovery procedure were called. Gone. It's gone, Finch. So it is for all of them. He even jumped. After taking a shower to wash off the remnants of biogel, he went to drink tea, as recommended by experts before departure. Now the people will come up, and he will tell them all how he was plagued by failures just before departure, so he will give food for the appearance of new stories in the Navy. That's enough for a few years. They will acquire new details that did not exist, and they will go from mouth to mouth, acquiring more and more new facts each time. After putting on his combat suit, he went to the wardroom, where he sat on the sofa with his feet up on the table, waiting for his flight companions. I turned on a movie, started watching it, and at the same time poured myself another bulky cardboard glass of tea. He even managed to laugh at some gags in the comedy, but the laugh turned out to be kind of nervous. Something was wrong. What exactly? And the fact that none of the crew has yet come to the cabin. Did they rush to their posts at once? Oh no, it can't be. It turns out that Finch, having come to his senses from the fact that nothing irreparable had happened to him, completely forgot to check the capsules of the rest of the crew. Actually, this was not his responsibility, but still. Returning to the capsule compartment, he began to examine them carefully, remembering the course he had taken shortly before departure. He walked over to the captain's capsule and peered at the sensors. So, there should be sensors on this panel that show whether the capsule is closed, empty or not, and whether the person inside is alive. So, they're all glowing red here. Everything went cold inside, and my heart sank to my heels, hitting the steel floor. An emergency capsule opening system. Here it is. All you have to do is click on the panel. Each crew member has access. That's the order. The lid of the jump capsule lifted up, and a red-maroon, sticky, slippery porridge poured onto the floor, interspersed with something white and red. It seemed as if an eye even slid onto the floor. Finch jumped back, restraining his gag reflex, and walked shakily to the Exo's capsule. The red light appeared again. Realizing what was about to happen, he pressed the padlock anyway. The same disgusting slush poured onto the floor. The next capsule of the engineer is the orange light of life. What does it mean? What does the orange light mean? He had completely forgotten, but with a cold finger he pressed the lock panel anyway. Nothing spilled on the floor. But should we be happy about it? He closed his eyes. Finch took a deep breath and opened his eyes. Good Lord! A strangled sound escaped from his chest. A creature was looking at him. A creature that looked like a man turned inside out, who had also been assembled in violation of all possible instructions. Suddenly, watery eyes with bulging red veins and irregularly shaped pupils looked straight at Finch. Kill him! The hoarse sound came from what should have been a mouth and teeth. Kill me! Finch looked at what had once been a ship's engineer, and he was literally paralyzed by fear. Injection! The creature continued to ask. Injection! The panel! Finch looked at the panel the engineer was talking about. With trembling fingers, he selected the necessary option, and how he remembered it, and pressed the button. The engineer creature jerked and went limp, and Finch closed the capsule. There were still 6 capsules left. 6 capsules, the panels of each of which were glowing red. You're so lucky, Joe, Finch said resignedly.